back to episode 36 of the Balance to Improve podcast, where we read a book a week and we break down the challenging, complex ideas in that book and turn them into actionable steps for progress. My name is Chris Pound.
My name is Landon Eller.
And the book that we decided to read this week was Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. Who is Napoleon Hill?
So to give a little background on who Napoleon Hill is, he grew up very poor in a one-bedroom cabin. He was born in 1883, to give you a time frame of when he lived, and he ended up being taken in by his relatives around age 12, and he got his start into what he was eventually going to do for his career at age 13 when he began writing for local newspapers. Eventually, he went into school and he wanted to do two things. He did journalism and law, and he used his journalism degree to fund law school. But his big break came when he was tasked with the opportunity to go interview Andrew Carnegie. And as a result of this interview, one of his takeaways was to see if he can interview a whole bunch of different millionaires and find out what made them tick and also how did they become wealthy and happy.
If you were able to interview one person and kind of just be able to pick their brain on any subject, I guess it can be present or past, who would you want to have a conversation with, I guess?
I would probably go Russell Westbrook.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay, that's interesting. Why? What makes you pick him out of all the millions and billions of people out there?
I grew up enjoying basketball a lot, and when him, Katie, and Harden were all on the team together, I really liked the energy he played with and his playmaking ability. So just pick his brain on how he got to where he was.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about a person like Russell Westbrook, you kind of automatically assume that the mindset that someone like that would have to have is extreme, right? I mean, the countless hours and days and weeks and months and years of hard work and determination that Russell Westbrook had to put into place in order to get to the place he is in today, I think there'd be a lot of great things that you'd be able to really pull out of Russell.
Yeah. And so kind of delving back into the Think and Grow Rich here, he broke up the book into 13 principles to achieve this happiness or wealthy stage, and he kind of left the secret of all of this ambiguous and left it up to interpretation for the reader. So we're going to try to go into a couple of these principles and convey our thoughts.
And kind of starting off with the first principle that Hill kind of introduced to us was the power of thought. And he goes on to explain that you ultimately control your own destiny, right? But in order to be able to get where you want to be, you have to be able to control your thoughts and your emotions first. So, and that looks different for everybody because their thoughts and their emotions are different from mine or Landon's. So I guess, what are some of the ways that you've been able to kind of master your thoughts, whether it be good or bad thoughts, and how has that ultimately changed you for the better or for the worse?
I don't even think I'm close to mastering my thoughts, but I try, and the biggest way I think of it is like filter in, filter out. So everything that I think on the way in, I try to parse it down and extract some of that.
So would you say you try to implement the think again theory from Adam Grant into your everyday life?
Yeah, I would, because before I try to say something back, that's definitely something I'm like, should I really say this? And well, sometimes it doesn't come out as it's supposed to, but like there's 1,000 shots on your goalie or your brain a day, and ultimately a couple of those are probably going to get past, so I just try to keep that number as low as possible. But the power of thought here, it just really made me think about Marcus Aurelius's theory on like Stoicism and how the power of thought is so important. Like who you think makes up who you are.
And one of the best examples from this book, thinking about how your thoughts can kind of shape your reality, is the story of Edwin Barnes.
So growing up, his thought was, I want to be business associates with Thomas Edison or the great inventor. But a lot of people just kind of have that thought and just let it sit on that back burner. But he decided to take action and kind of burnt all the bridges behind him. And he went straight to Thomas Edison and was like, I want to be business associates with you. And Thomas right away could tell just from the guy's facial expressions that he was being legit. But this didn't mean right away that he began working with Thomas Edison. He had to start doing the most menial task that everybody just thought, oh, he's just one of Thomas Edison's workers again. Yeah. But eventually, he kept this thought or idea cooking up, and he kept the desire within him. And when his opportunity to grow exponentially with Thomas presented itself, he was ready for it.
Yeah.
So following up on your story with Barnes, how do you think thinking has shaped your reality?
For me personally, I would say I kind of had to really rethink about things when I was first diagnosed with narcolepsy. It's a rare disease, but ultimately, because of this diagnosis, it kind of gave me an excuse to feel the way I do about certain things. And over time, I kind of got tired of myself coming up with these silly little excuses for not doing the things that I know that needed to be done. And so in order for me to grow as a person, I needed to change the way I thought about narcolepsy as a whole, right? I needed to realize that nobody else feels the way I do about this, and nobody understands how I feel about this. So quit trying to ask other people's opinions or methods or this and that and this and that. I had to change the way I thought about it. And over time, I started to realize, okay, so what? So what, I've got narcolepsy. No one else seems to care, so why should I care? And so I really started to live that in. I really started to believe it, right? I started to believe that I don't have narcolepsy. I'm just normal as everyone else. And I think over time, that really did kind of shape the way I thought about the narcolepsy. And so after 2.5, 3 years of being diagnosed, I've gotten to the point where unless I had told you I had narcolepsy, you'd have no idea, because I don't act tired. I might look tired, but just pulling long nights and early mornings kind of does that to you. But it's all about how you think about your own reality in order to perceive yourself how you want to be perceived.
Yeah, what you think determines who you are. And this goes right into like another point in this chapter is mindset drives riches. And this mindset is formulated with a definite purpose. So he kind of makes a distinction between success conscious people and failure conscious people. And the success base is if you think about success and you have it ingrained in your mind, you're generally going to attract success or succeed within your life. It's kind of like the principle of you are who you surround yourself with. So I just think that plays right into what you were saying.
Yeah, absolutely. And to talk about the first principle that Hill kind of introduced in this book was desire, or better yet, the starting point for all achievement, right?
Yeah, and we've touched on desire, I think, in different forms throughout all the books we've read pretty much, and that's like your definite purpose, your why. It's what you want so badly that that's all you can see. And when I was reading this section, what really stood out to me was when we read Robert Greene's 33 Strategies for War, the death ground strategy. And this goes back to Barnes. He burned all of the bridges behind him, so he had no way to retreat. So his only way to succeed was to be a business partner of...
Yeah. He had to see his desire all the way through.
Yeah, and that kind of led me to another question. It was like, yeah, we're talking about the Barneses, we're talking about the Henry Fords, the Thomas Edisons, but what about all the people who had that burning desire that didn't make it?
And I think that's where persistence really comes into play here. When Barnes had one desire in his entire life, and he felt like if he didn't achieve his desire or his sole purpose in life of being business associates with Edison, then he wouldn't have fulfilled his own personal goal. And so Hill really breaks down that there are 6 steps to turn any desire into riches. First being, find the fixed amount of money that you want and you desire, and then decide what you will give up in order to achieve that amount of money, and then set a definite date to have possession of this money within your own hands. Fourth is to create a clear plan, and you don't need to wait on the best opportunity. Once you have a plan in your mind, you need to take that plan and put it into action. And then you need to write a clear statement, including the amount, the deadline, what you'll give up for this amount of money, and how you plan on getting it. And then he goes on to mention that you should read this thing twice a day, once before going to bed and once right after you wake up. This kind of puts it into your subconscious mind, right? You need to feel it, you need to live it, you need to visualize what you want and what you desire. And it all goes back to the power of thought, right? If you're thinking that you already are in possession of this amount of money or what you want in life, and you start to visualize yourself receiving this stuff, it's only a matter of time, essentially, is what Hill's trying to convey here.
Yeah, and something to add on to that is he quoted Ralph Waldo Emerson, who said, "Life gives what you ask of it." And I think these 6 steps really emulate that, because if you don't know what you're asking for, you're never going to get it. So if you don't write down these 6 steps to turn your desires into riches or better relationships or whatever you're seeking, then it's simply not going to happen. And I thought a powerful story that he gave in this section was he talked about his son. Mm-hmm. And when his son was born, he had no hearing. Mm-hmm. So, but Hill didn't let that dissuade him from...
He didn't accept the fact that his son couldn't hear. His son was literally born without ears, right? And so over time, he decided, I'm not willing to accept the fact that my son can't hear, right? We are going to do everything in our powers as parents in order to help my child hear. And so that's when he started to use some of the stuff that he was studying for over 20 years, and he started to incorporate it into his son's lives. And what ended up happening?
Yeah, like he had that burning desire to allow his son to hear. So he would tell him stories about how his disability per se was actually a great strength. So when his son went off to school or to deliver papers, like he was able to fulfill that desire that he was instilling in him. Yeah. And ultimately, he ended up going to college, and there was this trial that he was a part of that gave him a hearing aid, and that hearing aid ultimately ended up working. Yeah. And he ended up going to that company and working for that company. So it was kind of crazy, the full circle moment that was all created because of Hill's desire to instill in his son the ability to hear.
Yeah, and that's really important, because Hill, he placed his own desire into his son's head without his son even really realizing what he was doing, right? And over time, that desire actually became real, right?
But it's like weird. Like, do you think if he never did that, it would have still happened?
I mean, in the book, it talked about how his son literally didn't have the tools, or he physically could not. It was impossible for his son to hear. But throughout the things that Hill was trying to do for his son, he was able to hear at the end of the day. So I don't know. I mean, that's a very complex idea in itself, which ultimately goes back to how powerful the subconscious mind truly is, right? I mean, I can instill an idea into your head, but whether you have a burning desire for that idea, that determines a lot of different things, I think.
Yeah, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink.
Exactly.
But it's still, it almost sounds like hearsay. He just willed his son into hearing. But I think, if that desire wasn't there, then it would have just kind of been a toss-up luck. But since he kept believing in it, he kind of wished it into existence almost.
Exactly. And I think the big thing here is that he had faith, which is actually the second principle that Hill introduced in the book, which is visualizing and believing the attainment of desire, right? He had faith that if he was willing to work with his son throughout the years and instill this burning desire into his son's head, if he had faith that this would work, it will work, right? He was attaching the idea with emotion, and when you mix the two, apparently your sixth sense goes crazy, right? Your sixth sense, which we'll kind of get into another day, but it was really the faith idea that brought everything together.
So to kind of visualize how Hill is talking about these things so far is first you have a thought. Once you sit and think on that thought, it translates into a burning desire if you let it. Then all the thoughts that are coming into your conscious, thousands of them per day, they can be mixed with emotions. And here the emotions are like faith or love. And this almost amplifies those thoughts and allows them to connect with the subconscious. Then from the subconscious, it communicates with the infinite intelligence, which we'll get into on a later day as well. But it's kind of like what you send into your subconscious, be it through positive or negative emotions, those are the kind of vibrations you're going to send out to the infinite intelligence, or you can think of it as like the like almost like God or the subconscious of the universe. So it's like sending out positive vibes or positive karma, and you're going to get that back.
It's extremely important for you guys to realize that your subconscious mind cannot tell the difference between a positive thought and a negative thought. When you're thinking about things, you need to solely focus on the positive things, because they will come into
fruition.
Exactly. But if you start thinking about negative things, those are also going to become real things that you experience in the way that you feel. And so the subconscious mind, it responds to belief rather than logic. And so when you're constantly thinking about good things and you have a good belief and you have full faith that these things are going to come to you in due time, you actually start to experience these things firsthand. And I think that's crazy to think about. His son was never supposed to hear, right? Never supposed to hear. But the fact that he had faith and he believed that his son would hear someday actually came true. That just shows you the sheer power of your thoughts in general.
So this is probably extremely confusing. This book goes into a lot of topics that are very complex and deep. Yeah. But to try to make sense of it, we'll give an example on Charles Schwab. So Schwab worked for Carnegie at all the steel companies he owned. And originally, his steel companies were all discombobulated. Like he had a whole bunch of different entities everywhere. So Schwab came into this big event, and it had a whole bunch of bankers and high-profile people. And he pitched his idea to aggregate all of these different entities into one corporation, or U.S. Steel. So ultimately, he pitched to J.P. Morgan, like the actual J.P. Morgan, to buy all these companies and make them a single entity. Yeah. And then he presented that to Carnegie, which ultimately accepted. So this made Schwab the head of U.S. Steel now, because he had thought, he saw all of them together, all the efficiencies that they created. Then he had a burning desire to bring this to life. And then he mixed with the emotion of faith, which is the topic of this principle. And then this translated into his subconscious mind. And that he threw that out into the ether, or the infinite intelligence. And he willed it into life, essentially, by going to that event, communicating with the high-profile bankers and J.P. Morgan more specifically, and seeing it all the way through to when he was crowned as the CEO, I guess you could say, of U.S. Steel.
Yeah, he didn't necessarily have a plan in mind, and that's where the subconscious mind really comes into place. If you have the burning desire mixed in with faith and belief, it will kind of give you a plan. And it's up to you to determine if you're going to actually put that plan into action. And that is exactly what Charles Schwab did. He put his plan into action, right? He had an idea of combining all these different steel companies that are essentially owned by Carnegie under one roof. But before they could do that, they had to buy Carnegie out. And so it was mentioned that J.P. Morgan felt like Charles Schwab was the number one guy, or the best guy who understood the whole steel market. And so Charles Schwab actually listed all the different prices for all the different companies that he thought it would take in order to buy them out. And Andrew Carnegie had a price of what Charles Schwab thought of $320 million. Turned out to be about 400 million. But just the idea that he had a thought, he had a burning desire, and he believed in his plan, all those things came to life once he actually put his plan into action.
Yeah, so now how do you talk to your subconscious that will kind of materialize into actionable riches or relationships, etc.? And this is through the principle that he called autosuggestion. And what autosuggestion is equivalent to self-suggestion, and that is what you tell yourself is what you're going to think. So it goes back to, you have thousands of thoughts a day, and when you mix those thoughts with emotions, whether positive or negative, that's what feeds into your subconscious mind. And those are the types of opportunities, solutions, ideas that you attract back to yourself, is those ideas or thoughts that you feed into your subconscious mind.
So how do you remain confident when doubt starts to creep into your head? What are some of the things that you personally do on an everyday basis when you may not feel like, when you may feel you have imposter syndrome, for example? What are actionable steps that you do every single day?
I would say I would just push into as many positive thoughts as I can. Mm-hmm. Most of the things I say probably are like goofy in a sense, or I'm kind of lacking the exact word here, but it's just your subconscious basically takes in what you tell it. So you have control over all of your thoughts, exactly what Marcus Aurelius said in Stoicism. So if you're able to try to control your thoughts by putting up those barriers or filters to only take in the positive stuff, then you're more likely to have that subconscious mind get that doubt out of there.
And I like to think of Jason Khalipa's
as many reps as possible.
Exactly. His two circles, right? Things that I can control and things that I cannot control. The things that I cannot control, list them all out. Things I can control, list them all out. Go back, look through the list. All the things that you cannot control, erase, right? They don't matter. You have no physical control over all those different things. So why waste your time and worry about them and honestly fill your subconscious mind with those things in the first place, right? Because at the end of the day, you can't change the way someone feels about something, right? You're not going to be able to convince someone for one thing or another if you don't fully believe in that one thing, right? And it comes back to desire. If I had a burning desire about something and I tried to convince Landon about it, I need to be fully involved in that desire, and I need to have it backed by faith and emotions in order for him to kind of see how serious I am about this. And that's exactly what Charles Schwab did for JP Morgan, right?
Yeah, and I think just to tie, like as I was going through this up until this point, like the secret that he was trying to convey, my thought was, it's all in your head. It's everything is up to you. What you think, what you do, what you say, what actions you take is ultimately in your control. So what are you going to do with it is my biggest takeaway to what his secret he's trying to convey so far through the three principles that we discussed.
Yeah, at the end of the day, you are responsible for your outcome, right? And so you are literally your own thoughts, you're your environment, and you are the people that you hang around, right? And so if you can kind of cultivate a group or a mastermind, which is another topic that we'll dive into in another day, if you can encompass all of these different things and you think about them and you plant them into your subconscious mind, whether that be through auto-suggestion or a burning desire, if you're able to put everything together at some point or another, things will work out for you.
Yeah, so we hope we conveyed and made sense of the points so far. We'll get into the other topics in the next couple episodes, but that pretty much wraps up what we have for the first couple principles from Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill.
Now, let's kind of dive into our implementations from last week's book, Food Can Fix It by Dr. Oz. Yours was the 21-day challenge, and trying to incorporate some of those recipes and kind of that way of living. I guess, how have you felt since meal prepping and all that kind of thing?
I would say one big takeaway is I feel very satiated
Okay.
throughout the day. Like, I'm never like, man, I'm really hungry, I could eat. I just spread out all my things throughout the day, and I just always feel full.
Do you think that's because there's a lot more vegetables in this diet, and they kind of have the effect of volume to an extent?
I think it's a mix of protein,
Okay.
fiber. Like, as you incorporate a bunch of different elements into your food, you're going to get protein and fiber, which aid in slowing down your digestion, so you're satiated for that longer period of time. And I think that's the biggest reason.
Yeah, for me, mine was to incorporate more fruits and vegetables. I actually did a much better job this week incorporating this, and it's still something that I'm constantly trying to get better at. I mean, today I had some cucumber. My problem with fruit, especially, is I find that if I don't eat it quick enough, it goes bad like that, right?
Frozen.
Frozen fruit, really? Do you really?
No, you buy it frozen.
They've and you just munch on frozen fruit all day?
Frozen mangoes, frozen blueberries, frozen pineapple.
Okay, well, maybe that's something that I will have to try then, I suppose. We will not have an implementation for this week's episode, solely based on this book is so large and has so many complex ideas that we want to really be able to break things down and determine what things that we want to try to implement. So moving on to our favorite quotes from this week. You want to kick us off? Or
Yeah, I put a lot of them down.
I saw that.
First one's more like a poem. So it says, I bargained with life for a penny, and life would pay no more. However, I begged at evening when I counted my scanty store. For life is just employer, he gives what you ask. But once you have set the wages, why you must bear the task. I worked for a menial's hire, only to learn dismayed that any wage I asked for of life, life would have willingly paid. And I think
you did a phenomenal job on that. I really like how you emphasized the syllables. You had a great rhythm, but continue.
So, trying to regain my thought back here. It's life is what you get out of it, or life is what you ask for it. So, if you don't put your thoughts into an actual plan, or you don't develop that definite purpose, you're gonna be shooting at the sky with no targets in it. So give yourself something to aim at, and it will give you that desire to go 110% towards and achieve something like similar to what Edwin Barnes did.
Yeah. One of my quotes here is, our only limitations are those we set up in our own minds, right? Think about it. Our minds are so complex. What are there, like 14 billion or 14 trillion different neural connections within your brain, and they're not even fully understood to begin with?
That was at the time of when he wrote this book too, so that was early 1900s.
Yeah, but I don't think we truly understand how crazy our minds truly are. I heard a statistic, and I really don't believe this, but they say that we only have 10% of our capability within our minds. I don't necessarily know if that's true, but it's something to constantly think about, especially when you do realize that it's almost like the law of attraction, right? When you think about something and you visualize yourself having it, it almost comes into real life because you've thought so hard about how you're going to do this or what you want out of your life that it just suddenly appears. That's just kind of how crazy life is, right? I mean, there are so many different things that science can't explain, and Hill's son being one of those. Science can't explain why he's able to hear, right? He just is. But because he had a burning desire, and he had faith and a believing in the fact that he will help his son hear someday, it'll all work out, regardless of what science says. And that's exactly what happened.
Yeah, that's the hope, at least. I guess I'll limit myself to one more. And Napoleon said, all achievement, all earned riches have their beginning in an idea. And it's goes back to thought is power, the first thing we covered. Everything that you think has a possibility to be that next big thing. It's just what you take in action and the plans that you develop to carry those ideas out.
And to wrap up this week's quotes, my last one here is, keep on keeping on no matter how hard the going may be. And this is extremely important for you guys to understand that you have not failed until you accept the reality of that failure. If you have failed, but you continuously keep trying to improve on what you did fail on, just keep going down it, right? Keep going down that rabbit hole. If you have a burning desire to do something for your life and your goal or your family or your friends, it's up to you in order to achieve what you want to achieve. And the only person who's going to be able to dictate how that happens is you, right? So that pretty much wraps up episode 36. Thanks for tuning in. Don't forget to check us out on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcast, all at Bound to Improve. See you next week.